You're listening to the HR Happy Hour Network, sponsored by WorkHuman. If you've ever wondered what good can come of AI for HR, meet Human Intelligence. It uses the uniquely authentic data of WorkHuman's #1 rated employee recognition platform to uncover insights into good culture, skills, performance, and more. It also helps coach employees on what good peer-to-peer recognition looks like, turning every good job into better engagement, retention, and well-being. And it surfaces feel-good stories that illustrate the best of your company's culture. Learn about human intelligence at workhuman.com. That's WORKHUMAN.com, and join their force for good.
This episode of At Work in America is sponsored by Paychex, one of the leading providers of HR, payroll, retirement, and insurance solutions for businesses of all sizes. Are you gearing up for the summer hiring rush? Don't stress. Paychex has got your back with the seasonal hiring checklist. Whether you're hiring for summer, back to school, or the holiday season, this free checklist is your step-by-step guide to building your best team. From AI-powered recruitment tools to prepping your onboarding process, it's designed to help you hire smarter, faster, and stress-free. Plus, you'll get tips for crafting job descriptions, marketing your openings, and even making sure you're staying compliant with labor laws. Don't wait until the last minute this year. Grab the checklist today at paychex.com/AWIA. That's PAYCHEX.com/AWIA. Make this hiring season your easiest yet.
Welcome to At Work in America, the podcast that leads the conversation on the future of work. Proudly sponsored by Paychex and WorkHuman, we go beyond the headlines to uncover bold ideas, fresh perspectives, and the real stories of people shaping workplaces for the better. And now, here are your hosts, Steve Bose and Trish Steed, bringing you the insights and trends that will inspire what's next in the world of work.
Welcome to the At Work in America show. My name's Steve Bose. I'm with Trish Steed. Of course, Trish, what's happening?
Fantastic day. It is snowing where I am, and it's almost Easter. Like, how do those two go together?
I don't know.
Crazy.
I don't know. I'm in this like tornado, rain, flood alley in central United States today. It's thundering right now as we speak. Hopefully the house isn't going to float away this afternoon, but
I'm in Colorado. Hopefully the snow will dissipate before it gets to the middle.
Yeah, we'll see. We have a great topic today, Trish. I don't think we've ever really talked about this in like a million years of podcasting and 700 or 800 shows. We're going to be talking about how to improve your communication skills, how to get better at presenting, how to be memorable while you're presenting. And I am fascinated by the topic. And in the prep for the show, I've learned a few things and I'm thinking like, oh, I know what I'm doing. I presented all over the world, right? No, man, I don't know anything. So I am so excited. We're welcoming Bill McGowan, who's with us today. Bill is the founder and CEO of Clarity Media Group. He's an Emmy-winning journalist and a best-selling author. And he's got a new book coming out soon called Speak Memorably, The Art of Captivating an Audience. And Bill, welcome to the show. And congratulations on the book. We're lucky enough to share an advanced copy with us. And it's a great read. And I was like laughing out loud reading it today, but in a good way. So welcome. How are you?
Thank you, Steve and Trish. That's a great compliment because I always want to make sure that people are able to have a few laughs. In fact, there's a chapter in the book about the importance of levity in public speaking and presenting. So you have to make it an enjoyable, delightful experience for people. And the problem with most business place communications is it's pretty dull. It's kind of drudgery, and it doesn't have to be that way.
For sure. It's a fascinating read, and I can't wait to get my hands on like a hard copy of it, because I will get the hard copy of it because I want to carry it around with me. But maybe before we dive into Speak Memorably and some of the strategies and tips you have in the book to like using humor as a big part of it, let's talk a little bit about you. You broadcast journalism, spent many years interviewing people, I imagine, presenting, doing tape pieces, recorded pieces. Like, tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, I started at CBS in New York, just logging in videotapes when I was about 18 years old. And I like to say that I've worked for every network but CNN as a writer, reporter, producer. And one of the things you learn in TV is how to tell a compelling story in a minute to 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really valuable skill to learn. And I would say, of all the things that I do that turns out to be the most valuable, I feel as though writing skills still are so important in your communication skills, because when we coach people to give a presentation or a keynote, ideally what we do is we go into their content, their written content, and make a lot of changes, because it's hard to deliver a bad script well. You ever see, a great legendary actor
Yeah.
from Hollywood, and they're in a real turkey of a movie, and the whole thing just brings down their performance, and it happens to public speakers too. So I learned that 1 to 2 minute time frame of telling a compelling story, making it visual, making it relatable, and that has been enormously beneficial in the work
So
I
you
do.
were already like ready for the TikTok era, like decades before there was TikTok, right? In some
And
ways.
a decade before there was Facebook, right?
Yeah.
In fact, when I was a producer at 2020 at ABC, we used to produce long form stories, 10, 12 minutes. And now long form is 3 minutes, give you an idea how much things have changed in TV. But when you produced a story and it was on the air, the next day you would go into the executive producer's office, and what they had was minute by minute ratings. And it showed in the 12 minutes your story was on the air where people dropped off or where people came in. And they were able to dissect your story and where it started to get a little boring or where you started to lose people. So you would have executives at the show say, "You see where you introduced that character at 4 minutes? There's too many names, too many characters. You lost people there." And it was a brutal ritual that you had to go through, but it really taught me a lot in terms of making sure speakers don't shoot over the heads of the audience. They don't overload what they have to say with too much data or too many names of people that the audience doesn't know. You really have to approach it empathetically and ask yourself, what is this audience likely to know? What can I reasonably assume they have knowledge wise? And what do they want from me? What's the most valuable information I can provide to them? It's not about you, it's about them, the audience.
Love that. And I had never heard sort of that experience where you're getting sort of critiqued with that, I guess, that much clarity around when things happen. In the business world, we don't have that luxury, and especially not when you're giving a presentation, right? You're trying to maybe gauge some of that by, are the people still maintaining eye contact? Are they getting up and walking out, right? But at that point, I almost feel like even though things may happen, you're stuck in the moment. So when it comes to sort of taking what you've learned from production into, corporate boardrooms or large presentations, what would you say would be something that someone can do maybe in the moment, or is there something they can do? Does it happen more in the preparation?
It is all about the preparation, but the last thing you should do is speed up. If you feel as though you are losing your audience, that will be a clear sign that you're experiencing anxiety, that you feel as though this is not worthy of your audience's time. It starts to become a snowball at that point. What would be better to do is, let's say you're going through a slide deck and you feel as though, well, the people around the conference table seem a little antsy today. People are checking their phones a little more often than usual. Perhaps what you do is you scale back what you say per slide. And that is not possible if you are presenting a deck that is chock full of text and information, because then people will realize you're glossing over things and you're skipping over material. if you make your PowerPoints or your keynotes or whatever tool you use for a deck, if you keep the information very, very sparse, take a minimalist approach to what is on the slide, then you're in control of how deep or how shallow you can go in the explanation and the laying out of information per slide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've done it both ways. I tend to like when it's just a photo of something that prompts me to tell a story. But in fact, when you work in, I guess, many industries, but especially in HR technology, so it depends on the type of presentation, but in HR technology, we tend to want to put a lot of data, right? A lot of
Yeah.
graphs and charts and whatnot. And so what what are some things you can do if you do scale back your slides? Do you recommend maybe, giving out handouts or things at the end to sort of illustrate maybe with data, or how do you handle those situations?
It requires a little bit more work, but one good way of doing it is to have two versions of your deck. Have one that is completely robust with all the information that you feel is necessary for people to have on hand, and assume that that's the deck that would require no narration to accompany it, no talk track. And you have that be the deck you send ahead or you leave behind. But that's not the deck you show when you're standing in front of the room.
Yeah.
Take that deck and strip it way down to its bare minimum. And then that's the one that you deliver to.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking, Trish, about numbers and graphs, and my pet peeve is when I see a graph and all of the explanations for what the y-axis is and the x-axis are in size 3 font, on the screen. And often I have to tell people no one can see that, and not only can they see it, but they're not looking there.
I think worse than actually doing that, Bill, is when the speaker calls that out the second they put that slide up on the screen and says, I know you can't see this, but here's what it says.
Yeah. Or I know this looks like an eye chart, but, don't fix it. Don't apologize, and
Right.
don't draw more attention to your own shortcoming.
I've done
Yeah,
that though. I've done it.
it's so true. We joked, or I did a little bit about TikTok a second ago, Bill. But would you say that in over time you've been doing this for a while, coaching, working with corporate clients and other clients, and helping them improve their skills, et cetera? Are audiences changing as a result of just media changing and consumption trends and habits changing, and whether it's TikTok or others, attention spans declining? We hear that a lot. Do you see that?
Yeah.
And have you changed your approach because of it?
Absolutely. There's no question. In fact, scientifically, it's been shown that the average attention span has shrunk dramatically in the last 5 to 10 years. And I think that that's a constant trend. To me, what it means is every 30 seconds in a presentation, you need to do something to reignite the interest of your audience. And this is where presenting becomes an art. It's not just about presenting a series of maybe independent, separate slides. And too many people think of presenting in that way. They don't think of it as having an overarching narrative, a story arc that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you're weaving some maybe metaphorical theme through the entire presentation. But every 30 seconds, you should be doing something to reignite the interest of your audience. One tool that is, I think, really, really effective is what I call a drum roll line. And a drum roll line is a sentence that teases the reveal of information that's about to come. That could sound something like, but if we accomplish anything this quarter, here's the most important thing we need to do. And then you pause and then you reveal that. So think of that as a drum roll line. And because if you're the best communicator on the planet, it doesn't matter. You're still going to get drift from your audience. People are still going to be daydreaming what they're going to have for lunch, no matter how good you are. So we have to be in the drift killing business, basically. And the beauty of the drum roll line is if they are checking their phone or daydreaming about whether they left the garage door up or whatever, that line they'll hear out of the corner of their ear, and they'll realize something important is coming, and they will turn and engage with you right at the moment that you need them to engage, and that's saying the most important thing.
Yeah.
So the drum roll line should be reserved for some of the most important things you say in communicating to people.
I
Love
like
that.
that. Yeah, go
Or
ahead,
so
Trish.
for the examples that you gave in the book about that, because you had even more, what I found myself doing was going back and using it almost as a tool to evaluate past presentations I've given in terms of, oh, I can see in this one, I really did have a through line, a storyline to the entire thing, and then maybe pick out the ones where I didn't do such a good job at that. So I think too, you can use the book in ways as almost like a checklist, if you will. How did I do? Do I do these different things to make it more interesting for my listeners? And I think having gone to virtual presentations for a number of years during the pandemic, we sort of lost the visual cues we can get from an audience. So suddenly being back in front of real people, we have to change the way we present. And
Yes.
I think that's been a big challenge. Have you noticed that at all with whether it's yourself or other, leaders you're working with?
You get more investment from your audience in person. There's no question about it. One of the things that I talk about in Speak Memorably is this this trap that people fall into in virtual calls where you are, say you're presenting to 6 people, and there is that chain of thumbnail video windows that show the participants in the call. And on virtual, there's no question that people don't feel the need to look into the webcam. They can be looking around, or maybe they're taking notes, but you don't see they're taking notes. If you think the worst, you're probably thinking they're texting with their friends, but they look disengaged on virtual. And I discovered a while back that reading the room is possible, but you can't read a Zoom. And what I mean by that is looking over at those people on the call does not give you an accurate barometer of how you're doing. And I reached a point in my own presentations where I decided, you keep distracting yourself looking over at people to gauge whether they're listening and whether they're finding it interesting. And it's taking your attention away from what you're there to do, and that's communicate your presentation. So one day I decided I'm just going to close all those video windows.
Yeah.
I'm just going to close them all. And it completely transformed the level of focus and attention I was giving to the presentation, because I was looking over to get something I was never going to get. And that's affirmation that this is landing and sticking with people and they're finding it interesting.
And see, I've never thought to do that. I can't even tell. We've done countless presentations over the years on Zoom, and you're right. It always feels disconnected, but you have this urge to look.
You
So
do.
that's a phenomenal tip because people are still doing presentations and live recordings like
Mm-hmm.
we're doing right now. So that's a
Right.
great tip, actually.
But I think one of the big themes I picked up, Bill, from Speak Memorably was, and it's not new to me, but you hammer it home so well, and the importance of it so well, which is that storytelling element, not just in the arc of your entire presentation if you're giving a presentation, but even in the individual components of the presentation. Like each bit of material or each slide should have a beginning, middle, and end in its own self, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
otherwise maybe
Yeah.
it doesn't sort of deserve to have its own little section there. And that's something I don't think about enough personally, right? Because sometimes you just use those slides, and I'm guilty of this, of just rat-tat-tatting them one after the other. And I think maybe overwhelming people with too much, maybe material that you're not really thoughtfully thinking about presenting in that fashion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a chapter in the book called the Coppola storytelling formula. And I had seen a interview with Coppola maybe 2-3 years ago on CNN. Fareed Zakaria was interviewing him, and he asked him, "Do you have a formula that you use in making a movie?" And he said, "Well, I learned from the masters in Hollywood years ago that you should identify your 3 best things and take the best thing and finish with it. take the second best thing and lead with it, and find some logical thematic place in the middle to put your third thing. And he was talking about movie making, but movie making is storytelling. Giving a presentation at work should be storytelling. And I realized this is a great formula for giving a presentation and speaking to your colleagues. Too often, I find people kind of leave their presentation in a very coasting, running out of gas, slow come to a stop, nothing terribly interesting at the end. And I think you need to leave them with a bang. You need to hook them at the top, and you need to finish it, whether it's a call to action or next steps, whatever it is, it's got to be compelling. And then, as you said, Steve, that formula even works well in each slide of your presentation. You should know cold, what is the opening line that gets me into this slide? What's the big idea in this slide? If you remember nothing else from this slide, remember this kind of idea, although never say that.
Right.
And then what's the closing line? How do I finish here? Or how do I create a very intentional line that segues from this slide to the next slide? And everything you say in and around those three things can have a lot of conversational wiggle room. It shouldn't be committed to rigid memory, but each of those three things should be concise, punchy, declarative, simple sentences. And that's what gives a presentation a nice, crisp, well-produced feel.
Yeah,
I love the idea of producing your own presentation because we're not thinking of it like that. We're thinking like, oh, we just have this information we must get out.
That's
Right?
right. And I
We're
have
gonna
to cover all these bases, and yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you stopped me in my tracks with a lot of your pieces of advice, Bill. And not that I disagree with them, but I just never I presented a lot, right? And
Yeah.
I
And
swear,
it's probably
Bill,
gone really well.
yeah, maybe
You
I'm
know,
okay, right? I should have known this before. But you sort of said don't have an agenda slide. Don't list out the 7 things you're going to talk about on an agenda slide. I do that every single time I present, probably still.
Now
And I
wait.
think about
well,
it.
when was the last time you went to a bookstore and you
Yeah,
bought a book and thought, boy, I can't wait to go home and rip open that table of contents?
I know.
That's never been said ever in the history of reading. And so I think that that agenda slide is a bit overused.
Yeah.
It immediately gives the audience this sense of, oh, okay, the real presentation is going to start for about 45 seconds. So I can remain in my stupor until then. And
Yeah.
then the real start is still coming.
No, it made sense to me after I
Yeah.
read it. And but I think about too now that now we're chatting here, I'm thinking, well, we've done whatever, 600 or 700 of these podcasts probably over the years. And I've never once on the podcast said, okay, today on the podcast, we're going to talk about these 5 things, and
Right.
listed them one after the 5. Maybe
Yeah.
we've never done that, right? We've just
Yeah.
talked like quote unquote normal people, right? And it's worked out okay, I think, so far. But yeah, but it's
Yeah, I
super
mean, I
point.
think that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a statement of purpose as to what the heck am I doing up here in the front of the room and what value does it have for you? But I think that line could go at the end of some kind of concise opening story or metaphorical anecdote, and then you can segue into, and today what I hope to accomplish is X, Y, and Z, and then you get right into it.
Yeah.
Well, I will
That's such a
say
better way to do it.
we had an interview last summer, I believe it was, with a gentleman who was the CEO of a thing called the Skin Deep. Topaz Azizes, I think his last name is. And I don't know if you've met him or heard his information, but what he talked about was not having an agenda at the front, but it was talking about your intentions. So we have,
Yes.
in most cases since then, Steve and I have begun doing intentions instead of giving sort of the play-by-play,
Yeah.
if you will. And
Yeah.
that's worked out. So even I gave 2 recently in Europe, one in Norway and one in Amsterdam. And in both cases, people came up after the presentation and mentioned they loved the intentions because I was sort of saying, I'm here to have a relationship with you. This isn't me just giving you information. We're going to have a dialogue and keep me honest. By the end, we will have hopefully covered what I intend for us to cover, right? our joint intentions. So, but I love the idea of just not even including even that is formally.
Yeah, maybe
Right.
not. Maybe not.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen a lot of presenters weave in a very subtle, nuanced way that statement of purpose and that statement of intent. And in the book, there's an entire chapter on the importance of empathy. A lot of speakers get up and it's all about them. And ultimately, it's not. It's about the audience. And you need to put everything should be filtered through what you think they need and want.
Yeah, that's good advice in general, not just in a presentation or in a boardroom. One of the things I found interesting in the book was you were talking about meetings and how they're really not that effective. Could you maybe talk a little bit more in our daily communication? What can we be thinking about, or should we be thinking about if we're going in, whether it's a one-on-one or maybe a small group meeting with our team, whether maybe we're not even the leader? And I want to preface it with you said that we're always auditioning for our next role. So with that in mind, if I'm going into a meeting with maybe my boss and several of my peers, how should I be showing up? What should be on my mind if I'm auditioning for my next big role?
Saying a lot in very few words, because most people talk a lot and say very little. And if you're auditioning for your next role with somebody who is superior of yours in a company, don't waste their time. There's nothing worse than doing that. Showing an economy of words and efficiency in communicating. Most people belabor a point and go around in circles and meander and repeat themselves. They overstay their conversational welcome. And there's a chapter in the book that's called The Verbal Diet, which really challenges people to get by each day with fewer words. We speak probably about 16,000 words a day. And my challenge in the book is imagine if somebody told you you only get 12,000 today. Imagine how that would change your perception of speaking. You would be constantly aware of the need to be efficient and concise in what you say, for fear that you'd get to 4 o'clock in the afternoon and you'd run out of words, and then you'd have to pantomime the rest of the day. So, being very intentional and selective about what you say instead of saying the first thing that pops into your head and keep going and misleadingly thinking more is more. I, the people who demonstrate the greatest gravitas are the ones who are able to have a lot of impact in a short period of time. And that is all about preparation. There's no question about it. If you're going into a meeting, and even if you don't think you're going to have a speaking role in this meeting, go in with a game plan of what are you going to say if somebody at that table wheels around and says, Bill, what do you think of all this? You do not want to be flat footed when that happens. You want to
Yeah.
go in with a clear, concise point of view. And most people are not prepared. They think it's going to magically come to them in the moment because they think great communicators are good on their feet or great off the cuff. There is no such thing. The people who are great communicators are relentless preparers, and they never, ever allow themselves to be blindsided.
This is going to reveal something about me. I don't care. I'll reveal it. I watch a lot of Married at First Sight, 90 Day Fiance. That's like my relaxing thing these days lately. And
Your guilty
soccer, too.
pleasure.
I love it though. But so I watched a lot of people get married on TV the last few years. And when it's time to sort of do the vows, right, to each person with the vows, I think sometimes they get up there and they just go off the cuff. And, in the biggest moment of their life up to that point, right, they're going off the cuff. They stammer around and they say some silly things and they stumble. They get a little emotional, right? The people who do a real good job at it reach into the pocket or wherever on the dress you keep things and take out the little card or the piece of paper and read them. and they do so much better at it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But that's a matter of saying, hey, I've prepped, I've written this down. This is really what I want to say in this very important moment. And I'm comfortable. I'm going to read this right now. And so, yeah, that's how I think. But I don't know if you agree or disagree and something like that. But the matter of preparation, though, is really why I brought that up, right? I've prepared for this to the point where I wanted to make, these are the things I want to say in this moment. Whether it's a big boardroom meeting or a wedding or some other thing, right? So yeah, I think that there's some element there of preparation. I think that runs through those scenarios.
Absolutely. When I was really early in my career, I was asked by my high school alma mater, because I had a production company, and my high school alma mater asked me if I would do a branding video for the school. And I thought, great, I know the school well, and as part of the video, I wanted to shoot commencement. And Diana Ross was the guest speaker because her daughter was in the senior class. And I love Diana Ross. She's a legend in the music industry, and it's hard to find somebody more talented than Diana Ross. But she got up there that day totally unprepared. And it was one of the most cringy experiences I've ever seen live, because she essentially 7, 8, 9 times apologized, said, I don't know, this is really not coming out the way I wanted it to. And because she didn't have any notes in front of her, I think there are people around famous people who are enablers and sycophants who tell famous people, "Oh, you're great. You don't need to do what mere mortals do and prepare and have a speech." And everybody does. It doesn't matter if you're a legend. Steve Jobs practiced every product keynote speech 70 times. 70. Just imagine that. Because by the time he hit the stage, he wanted to have all the moves. He wanted to, there was nothing left to chance. So the really great people are relentless rehearsers.
Yeah.
And I think they come across like it is not from memory, right? That's the beauty of it. When you think about, I know in the book you mentioned Barack Obama is like that, one of the best speakers, because he comes across so relatable in his style. But he's also another one that is very, very prepared. I happened to work when he was running for president the first time. I was working in HR for the advertising agency he worked with. And so he wasn't there that day, but they said he would come in all the time and practice like at this podium. And I'm getting to like stand at the podium and I'm thinking, okay, rub off some of this goodness on me. But no,
The
but that was
magic
interesting.
dust.
Yeah, I would think in my mind, maybe prior to that point, I was quite young still, but I was thinking, wow, I didn't realize he would be practicing that often. They said, oh, all the time. And that was just for one element of his campaign.
Well, it's interesting because obviously in my practice at Clarity Media Group, I coach a lot of people on giving important talks. And you will come across people who say, "Oh, I've got this. I've got this," and I've done this a million times. And I tell them the story of Barack Obama in his first debate of the 2012 presidential campaign. He was running against Mitt Romney, and there's an interesting account of this from David Axelrod, who was one of his senior advisors, who apparently put files of information on Obama's desk. He put a stack of tapes that showed Romney performing in the Republican debates. And he noticed 2, 3 days later that it hadn't been touched. And so he went up to Obama and he said, Mr. President, just checking, is there anything I can do to help you focus, because you don't seem engaged in getting ready for this. And Obama said, "Don't worry, David, I'm a game time player. I will show up at game time." And he got his butt kicked in that first debate. And I tell people that I work with, if that guy can't mail it in and just pull it out of thin air, there is no hope for the rest of us.
Right.
So now we
Yeah.
know the rest of the story. I love that, knowing that
Yeah.
he had to fail. So that's maybe a good lesson, right? You have to fail, no matter who you are, sometimes in order to realize we all need to practice. We can all improve at whatever level we are speaking, whether that's into a large group, to a million people on TV, right?
Yeah, and I think there are lots of little things about presenting that will go wrong, and you now make a mental note to yourself, next time I won't get caught like that. I was giving a presentation at a graduate school here in New York, just a guest speaker kind of thing, and I don't know what happened, but like a feather flew down my throat, and I started
Oh, no.
uncontrollably coughing to the point where I couldn't resume talking. And I looked around the room. There's not a single bottle of water. There's no water fountain. I had to actually physically leave the room and go to a water fountain in the hallway. And from that moment on, I have always, in presenting, it doesn't matter what venue it is, I know where the water is
Yeah. That's a great tip. Yeah.
because you may need it.
Bill, we've kept you for a while, so we're not going to have time to go through, say, all of you have a great set of tactics you call the Magnificent Seven, which you cover in the book. We probably can't dig into all seven of them. You also spent a good chunk of the book, or first half of the book, talking about humor and the importance of humor in presentation, but also like going against some of the, the old kind of chestnuts we've heard of presenting, or someone might have told you over the years, like, get up there and tell a joke. That's a good way to loosen up the audience. And you say that's a terrible idea, right? Unless you're a professional joke teller, which most of us are not. So maybe from that, or whether it's humor, or maybe a couple of the seven tips, like using analogies or using metaphors. What are one or two things you said, hey, if you're going to pick one or two, I got a presentation next week, maybe start here and look to build upon your skills. What would be your favorite couple of things to recommend to folks?
Well, I agree. Don't start off with a joke. That advice is about as good as picture the audience in their underwear, which I don't know who created that one, but it's definitely not to be followed. I think there are seven, as you said, devices in the book that I think make for memorable lines. And in a world where everybody is messaged, I think being memorable is much more important. To have a line that sticks with people. I was coaching a group of hedge fund investors at this conference, and they were on stage. They were going to be on stage the next day talking about Brexit, which could be a really dry topic. It could be very hard to be memorable around that. But one of the guys got up, and we had worked on this line together. He said, I mean, listen, let's face it, before the last prime minister left office, she was the chess player only at the king left. And she was just moving it around one space at a time till she got checkmated. I don't know. I can't remember anybody else who was on that panel that day. I don't remember what anybody else on that panel said that day, but I still remember that guy.
Yeah.
And he gave, in that analogy, he gave everybody in the audience this little 7-second mental vacation. He allowed them to visualize a chessboard just for 7 seconds. And then they got a little mental refresh, and then they were able to come back and re-engage on the topic of Brexit. Or, as I know you and I, Steve, were talking earlier, and there was another topic of supply chain, which makes people's eyes roll back in their head, especially the topics that are really dense and not understandable. If you can use an analogy which helps explain it by comparing it to something common to everybody's experience, it can be great. So to explain the supply chain bottleneck, we were talking about it being like a 6-lane freeway merging into a 1-lane country road.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe nobody understands what all those ships out at anchored off, ports means, but everybody's been stuck in that traffic and they've had to squeeze into that merge. Everybody understands that, and that's how you get people to relate to things.
Yeah, that's great. I remember one, I don't remember who the speaker was. It's a while ago, but it was a financial topic similar to like Brexit, if you will, or supply chain. But it was about like the yen carry trade, which is some sort of foreign currency trade that you can, you can make some money on it or you can lose your shirt, right? And his point was, hey, if this trade now is no good anymore and you're going to get destroyed, like you're going to lose your money. So instead of saying, oh, the yen carry trade was wildly unprofitable in Q3, he said something like the yen carry trade like broke my heart and destroyed everything I love. He said it that way, right? And it's like,
Right. With emotion.
metaphorically, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh wow, yeah, that was a bad trade, right? If
Yeah.
your heart is broken and everything you love is now dead, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Or if an idea is outdated, you could say, this is now past the sell by date, right?
yeah,
Everybody's picked up something in a supermarket and looked at it like, oh, this thing is about to go bad because the sell date is,
yeah.
tomorrow. So I think if you could tap into those everyday experiences and metaphorically refer to them, that's great.
Yeah,
Who's great at
those are
this
great tips. There's so
is
many.
Warren
Yeah, they're good though.
Warren Buffett is great at this. When he talks about people who really don't have talent in investing, but they've done really well because the market's going gangbusters. He said, when the tide goes out, you see who's been swimming naked, and like everybody knows what that means.
So true.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess in a bigger picture, it's okay to be a little bit humorous, and not I'm not talking about inappropriateness or anything like that, but just you talked about like it's okay, a room full of financiers or hedge fund people, like you can do that and it can work. You don't necessarily have to. Oh my God, I can't. You should not be afraid to have a little bit of personality. You want to be memorable, right? It's the name of the book. Speak memorably. It's not
Mhm.
have the most accurate chart necessarily, right? Like
Right. Well,
yeah,
they've done some really interesting studies at Stanford that show that when you use levity in public speaking and presenting, that engagement and retention shoot way up. And so it's a really powerful tool to have your story land and stick. They've also shown that humor releases endorphins in within the audience, the feel good hormone, that it can cut anxiety, that it can actually make people physically feel better. So wielding it in public speaking is enormously beneficial. They've also done interesting studies that show people remember more facts around news stories when it's presented by John Oliver, Stephen Colbert, Jon Stewart than it does from any of the nightly news anchors.
I believe that. I will
Yeah.
say, to Steve's credit, he's very good at injecting humor into all of our very dry presentations that we have to give on tech trends. So
Right.
yeah.
thank you,
There
Yeah.
you
Steve,
go.
for being
Oh,
our
I
go-to
appreciate that.
humor.
Yeah. The one humor everybody should be a little wary of, though, is self-deprecating humor.
Mhm.
You can push that too far. That's best served in moderate little helpings because too much of it undermines your credibility and your authority.
Yeah, you're trying to be credible, authoritative, but also yeah, especially in a professional like a conference
Mm-hmm.
type setting, if you're doing those kind of speeches, like they're bringing you in to be, no one wants to hear, oh, we flew this person in from, Timbuktu to talk to you about this. Oh yeah, I don't really know what I'm doing, or all the ways you've screwed up that morning, right? There's yeah, there's some level to that, man. There's so much in here. I can't recommend this more highly for professionals, certainly for public speakers, but not just people who make a living speaking, but people just part of your job is to effectively communicate, which is all our jobs, right? We talked a little bit in the pre-show about, in a world full of AI and tools and technology, what's going to make you stand out? And a lot of what we're talking about in Speak Memorably is that's what's going to distinguish you and make people stand up and say, oh yeah, that person's really, you know, that made me think, or that moved me, or that helped me understand something in a way that just technology can't do right now. And I think that's probably the biggest, I think, value of this book and why folks should read it, I think.
I appreciate that really kind feedback, Steve. AI runs the risk of having us all get trapped in this conformity zone because it is an amalgamation. ChatGPT is an amalgamation of just everything that's out there on the web.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a mashup about what everybody else is doing. And I think generative AI is going to make it that much more necessary for, as you said, for us to show our personality in things and make everybody in the audience sit there and think, there's no way he could have ChatGPT'd this. No way.
Yeah, for sure. I love it. Yeah.
Well, I think too, you were talking about, showing your personality, but in the book, you had given an example of the Microsoft CEO who had kind of famously jumped all over the place when he came out for
Yeah.
a speech. So I was
Steve
thinking,
Ballmer. Yeah.
Yeah,
right,
Balmer. Yeah.
in terms of it's good for people who might already be in leadership to reevaluate our skill set, right, and continue to grow and refresh. But it's also, I was thinking, Steve has a son in his 20s. I have two kids in my 20s, in their 20s, and I would give this to them as a way to start your career, right? They're giving presentations now, high school, college, trade schools, whatever. So it would really be helpful, really, for someone of any age to improve the way that they're showing up and being memorable, especially in the age of AI.
Well, it's interesting. For 2 years in a row, a LinkedIn survey has identified communication skills as the most in-demand skill.
There you go.
And there's also a Harris poll that shows that the effectiveness of communication among leaders has dropped 12% over the last couple of years, with poor communication being cited for $1.2 trillion of loss because teams don't communicate well, a lot gets lost in the message. So it's a real bottom line kind of thing. No question about it.
Yeah, this book is going to be super helpful to so many folks, and I've already I'm telling you, I'm changing my next presentation already based on
Same.
stuff I've read in the book.
Same.
Great, let's practice it together, Steve.
And I've been doing a lot. Done presentations a ton, right? I'm not new at it,
Right.
right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, he's right. That's better. Do it that way, right? So like I said, I can't recommend it enough. I hope folks get connected to you, Bill. The work, obviously, the book's coming out soon. Anywhere else we want to direct people to you or to what you're doing at Clarity Media Group? Where would you like to? Last thing you'd like folks to know?
Yeah, we have a whole digital online academy that you can sign up for. 1-minute videos on presenting, on how to start, how to finish, and that's at claritymediagroup.com. So that's something worth checking out. And of course, I've trained thousands and thousands of people one-on-one, but at all levels, people just breaking into the work field and CEOs of companies, as you mentioned earlier. So I get tremendous enjoyment at both levels.
Well, thank you. You've at least trained two more that you can add to your list.
You got two new fans for sure.
Right.
There's no doubt about that.
Sincerely.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
really enjoyed this chat. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, this was great. So, Bill, thank you so much. We'll put links in the show notes to Clarity Media Group, to the content there, how you can get to the book as well. Trish, good stuff. I'll hope to be better next time after having read this, right? So you can judge me on that. You'll probably see my next presentation somewhere, and we'll find out.
Terrific. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Bill, thank you so much. Thanks, Trish. Thanks to our friends at Paychecks and Workhuman. Thanks for listening to the show. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And my name's Steve Bose. We'll see you next time. And bye for now.